Good night and welcome to another episode of Family Life, A Catholic Vision. I'm Lauren Jamada and this is...
I'm your new host. My name is Nyron Rollickson.
Right, so tonight we will be both hosting the show and we have a guest presenter. So to get into this show, you know that this month is the month for fathers. This month is when we celebrate, Father's Day. We really recognize fathers for all the greatness that they are. And, Father's Day is on Sunday, the 21st of June,
That's
right? So, the theme for the show would be fatherhood. So before we really get into the theme, Nyron, I want to give a special shout out to my dad, and to my uncle Mike and to my uncle Brian and my other uncles as well. I just want to give a special shout out to them, tell them thank you for everything that they have done for me, raising me into the woman that I've become and loving me the way that they do. So a special shout out to them, a special I love you. Is there anyone you'd like to shout out?
Of course,
as
well, just like you, I'd like to say a special thanks to my father as well, who played a very important role in shaping the man who I am today. I'd also like to thank my deceased grandparents as well, my grandfather on my mother's side and my father's side. They also played a very, very integral role in shaping and forming who I am today. So I'd like to say thank you, my fathers by blood, but I also want to thank fathers who are out there,
yes,
who played a very important role, even though they may not see it like that.
Yeah.
From priests to everyday people in my workplace, and stuff like that.
People that you just see on the street, thank you.
Of course, we are so starving in society now,
yes,
for good male role models,
yes.
And I think the more we see today, the better we are as a society. I really, really think this is the way we need to go.
Yeah, in developing the theme for this show, when I sat down and I thought about it, I really wanted to, should I be cliche about it? But then I realized that I want to be cliche. Because of my dad, I was able to know what love is, and I was able to identify, in choosing a partner, what I would like to see. Because growing up with my dad, I always saw a loving, caring, very attentive man, especially towards not only his children, but to his wife. So, when I'm choosing someone, I realize that, I want someone very similar to my dad, and especially, to my uncles. I grew up around it, so I want to be cliche about that,
All right. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
But I'm glad to hear how effortlessly you bring up these adjectives,
yes,
because for most in society today, it's very hard for people to find the right adjectives to describe, this person who is father.
Yes.
It's very easy to access, mother who's tender, mother who's caring, loving, patient.
Yes.
Or we could just rattle it off.
Go on and on, whole night about a mother, yes,
but,
of course, yes.
For fathers, it still remains a struggle for many people.
It does.
And perhaps today we need as much information and we need to explore that topic, I would say.
Yeah.
And maybe our guest today, Father Derek Anton, who hails from the parish of Sangre Grande. He's the current parish priest there. He's currently the spiritual director of Engage Encounter, a marriage preparation program offered to couples who are willing to get married. Mm-hmm. The course usually runs on weekends, but also offered during, in weekly meetings for a period of 8 sessions. For 11 years as a priest, he has had keen interest in the work of family life, and we would like to welcome him on our set.
Welcome, Father. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
All right. So, if you could help us explore, first of all, as I just mentioned, okay, we have had very much difficulty in our society to really use terms that really define who the father is. So, could you help us access, what is the role of a father, or who is this person we need to really value and appreciate today?
Yes.
Yes. So, sure. Maybe why we have so much difficulty in grappling with the role of the father, we have suffered in society, I think, with a dilution of that role. And today I think fatherhood, just like marriages and family life in general is very much under attack. I think in the past generation or two, we see that in the culture, and if you look at TV programs, even sitcoms that we look at very regularly, the role of the father, if you look from the 50s, where you had a traditional sort of family setting, and you come through, you think of some of those that we had in the 90s, and well, today they've gone to quite an extreme. But the role of the parents in general has been denigrated. We see that the parents are not in charge of the family, but the children are. And very much, while that is so with both parents maybe, for the father, we see that the father is almost ridiculed. His, marriage is something that is denigrated. It's not held out as a value, as a lifestyle that people would want to promote and aspire to. And the father, on many of those shows we look at, he seems like a kind of an idiot, like somebody you would not listen to, you wouldn't take him on seriously.
Like a second place.
Yes. And sometimes in the ads, I remember even ads here. I remember radio ad a couple years ago at Christmas. I think there was a repeat of the theme the next year. And there was a child and the father on the ad with what they're going to get for Christmas and so forth. And very much, the whole tone of it was that the child had a very mature, reasonable outlook, and the father was like a child. And he acted and spoke like a child.
Right.
And that is portrayed in the culture, and it kind of informs our subconscious. And so over many years, the role of the father in the family has been denigrated, his authority ridiculed, and there's been a confusion of his role, what exactly that role is.
Over time, yes.
And I would say that there's maybe even a bit of a parallel in the spiritual father, so that the importance of that role has also been questioned in recent times. There's been confusion and questioning of what really the priest is, and so we see that maybe both those roles of father have been, the young men have not been attracted to either of them. And so maybe that's why today we find ourselves, what really is the role? Because over many years we have kind of downplayed it, and maybe that is also part of what we have, the whole character of the male, over the past couple of generations. The kind of pendulum has swung, and the male is sort of under threat in society.
Well, perhaps, can we retrieve what was this original understanding from fathers that most people in society accept today?
Right. I think that, certainly, and maybe we can do it even by comparison with the role of the mother to kind of get an idea. Because we, as you were saying just now, we look at the mother in a very important role, the nurturing role, caring, showing empathy, wanting to understand, wanting to analyze, and so forth. And it's not that these attributes are, sort of her purview alone and not the father. Certainly we want our fathers to be loving, and so, but the mother has a sort of a predisposition. It's sort of like her forte. Yes. Whereas the father tends to be, he connects the children, he connects the family with society, with the wider community, and even the wider community that is the church, the body of the church. He tends to be more, a man tends to be more sort of a pragmatist, one who is sort of action-oriented, who wants to solve problems, who wants to make a decision and get to the bottom of it, sort of thing. So we see that there's sort of a different perspective in working out family issues, and so and the thing is that neither one can operate on its own or is exclusive to the other. We need the two of them working together. They're very much complementary roles.
Right. So Father, before you go on, you said in your first point, you mentioned that the father connects the children with the outside, and you drew examples like the church. Can you just be specific when you talk about that point? Can you shed some light on it? Give an example, maybe.
Right. There was I've heard statistics used on TV, and I'm not sure if they were more recent surveys, but I came across one. It's a good 20 years old now. I think it was in '94, done by the Swiss. And they found that in terms of parents bringing children to mass and practice of your faith, that when the father and the mother took the children to church, I think it was 33% of the children persevered in regular church attendance. If it was only the mother who took them and the father was non-practicing or just out of the picture totally, it was only like about 2 or 3% who continued. If it was only the father who took them and the mother was not there, non-practicing or irregular in practice, it went up to like 38, between 38 and 44%. So there's a huge gap between the mother alone or the father alone.
And why do you suppose so?
Well, there seems to be, I'll tell you one other statistic I heard. I can't remember the figures, but it was said recently that in conversion to the faith and so forth, that if a father converts and goes to another faith, more than likely the whole family will follow. If the mother does it, not necessarily so. There seems to be something that a child looks at with a father, that the father has a very special role in prayer and in the practice of his faith. I mean, we can think of biblical figures like Saint Joseph, who who would take his family every year up to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover, who was a man who listened to God, and when he was directed to protect his family, to protect the child, and went to great lengths, inconveniencing himself, but was very faithful to hearing the Lord and looking after his family. And he was there with them. And it seems to be, I can't say that I can tell you exactly how it works out, but it seems to be there. The proof of the pie is in eating, so to speak.
Right, so that brings me to an example, because growing up, my dad he was the one who always took us to church. My mom would be there, but most of the times when mom couldn't make it, dad would always come to church, and he's the reason why I still go to church, because seeing my dad go to church, it's almost, I just feel the need to go to church because he's culminated that within me, going to church and the meaning of going to church and the practice of going to church. So I am living proof of that example.
Certainly.
That my dad really has set the path for me with that, connecting me to church.
And that's a perfect example. If I could tell you something a little bit on the negative side, I had this young man, a parishioner, who I came across, ran into outside the parish a few years ago, and I said to him, well, I haven't seen you in a long time. Parish priests like to put people on the spot. And he said, well, it's true, Father, but I'm going to start coming back. So I said, well, good, but what made you change your mind? He said, my 6-year-old son. The 6-year-old son used to come to church with the aunt and his mother and so forth. And he was heard to say, this little boy, this 6-year-old, that I'm going to church now, but when I get big like my daddy, I'm not going to church anymore because my daddy doesn't go to church. And he also said, church is something for women. So he saw that was a negative example, and the father said, with perfect response, he said, well, I'm going to start coming back.
To church,
that's a very interesting point to bring up there, Father. Would you say that the church is meeting the needs of the modern male, given that more women go to church? I mean, it's evident, and this is something faced across denominations, I would say. At least in the Christian faith. I can't speak for the other religious beliefs in our society. But yes, would you say that in your experience, even as a parish priest and stuff like that, what do you think is basically obstructing males from being attracted to what we call church today?
Well, that's a very wide question and a difficult one to answer, I'm sure. But I think that that in my own thinking has been over several years that the male, whether in church or in society in general, has felt sort of sidelined and is struggling. It's somewhat of the old situation of the pendulum swing too, that at one time there was a dominance of the male, and then in the last couple of generations we have had the whole movement to respect the dignity of women, and they have taken their place in the workforce and so forth, and doing non-traditional roles and so forth. And I think what's expected of the man as well, that yes, in one sense, we still want you to be provider and defender and protector of the family, but we want to see your feminine side too. And we want to see, and as I said earlier, it's not that the man shouldn't have that caring, loving side. He ought to. But there was an expectation that maybe he felt he couldn't have met. And I've always felt for some time that we should do some studies in terms of how the male has fared through all of that. I think some studies have been done. Some things I've come across myself, And I think it has been that whole shift in society, and the male is not sure where he stands, whether in society as a whole and in the church in particular.
Yeah.
And so it is a serious challenge. Things have been done. I mean, myself, I came back into the church. I mean, certainly the call from God himself, but it was through the vehicle of a men's prayer group.
Right.
And that was a very big support system for me spiritually for many years before I entered seminary and so forth. And I know that, you know, like Father Dwight Merrick heads up, there's a men's movement with prayer groups around the country. And in that way, we try to make that outreach to men. But it is, certainly we have to have hope, but it has been a difficult road. But I think there are all sorts of factors in society in general that
of course, play
that are playing their part there.
Yeah. All right, so, you know, let's get into, of course, you know, the body of the show. And of course, you know, Family Life, a Catholic Vision, we are very well known for our reality clips that deal with very pertinent issues. So tonight, our reality clip is taken basically with 4 fathers. It's a focus group, and they were asked particular questions. So tonight, we're just going to, you know, shed some light on their responses, of course, create discussions around it, of course, Naira, myself, and Father. So let's get into the first clip of the night.
Provision. He has to provide for his family, then he sends out food, clothing, education, etc., etc. And then you have security. He has to ensure that the home is secure, that his children to and from school are secure, and his wife as secure as possible. It may not be always 100%, but he has to put his best effort.
Father's key role is to guide his family, to guide his children, to be there for them and to provide that stability in the family. Secondly, I think that the role of a father is to guard the family. The father is supposed to be the one who provides security for the family. Be there, looks out for the wife, looks out for the children, and provide that sense of security, that he's there, that he's a man in the house, and that he will act and react to any situation that is uncomfortable for the family. Lastly, also, I feel that the role of the father is to govern. And govern includes a lot of things. It includes provision, it includes provide that authority in the family, provide that guidance to take the family through.
I believe the role in the family for the father consists most importantly of spirituality. The Bible says that if a man cannot provide for his family, then he's worse than a man without the Holy Spirit. So he wants to be able to guide his family spiritually first. The provisions comes based on the fact that he might have the ability to do so, but most importantly, a father must be approachable. When he's approachable, all the wonderful qualities that a father can give to his family will then.
All right, and that was a few clips from, that was a clip from some members of the public who we interviewed. And as we saw there, Father, similar views on certain areas. We saw a lot of them supporting this idea of security of fathers. That becomes, that's a very dominant idea. There's guidance, especially for children. And they also talk about this role of provider, all right? Do you think this is an adequate assessment of the role of a father?
Well, it is part of it, and maybe a significant part, but certainly not the only one. And I was listening to here, and I was sort of pleasantly surprised where towards the end, one of the gentlemen talked about the spiritual role.
Yes.
Because I think that we have lost that, and it's a very significant part of what the fathers do. And I guess while he is the protector, the provider, defender, and so forth of the family, and I said earlier, he's very much action-oriented, which has its benefits, because you need to be able to take action, you need to be able to be decisive and so forth.
Yes.
But men, I think, have that tendency to fall into the focus on doing. And I think back to John Paul II, he was very much in making that distinction between that we need to be able to be before we do.
Right.
And so we have to come into who we are, first of all, as child of God, and then that spiritual role that we have in the family, and to bring the family also to know how we are, who we are in the sight of God, and the family unit as a a spiritual unit, you know, where, in a sense, imaging the image of God. You know, we just celebrated Trinity Sunday,
Yes.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, a communion of life and of love.
Right.
And in the family, that's the first community we live in,
Yeah.
and it's supposed to be that communion of love. So the family is supposed to reflect, be an image of God Himself. And I think this, the whole, as we were saying about the example of the father in prayerfulness, and that he needs to take that a very strong leadership role in leading his family in prayer. I think of an example. I mean, we talked of Saint Joseph, of course, but I think of in the book of Tobit, where this young man, and you know the story, a very strange story, where his bride, who is, you know, the one who is he's sort of ordained to meet and to marry, and she has been married 7 times before. On the wedding night, a demon has killed the husband.
Right.
So of course, Tobias is very much afraid of what's going to happen to him. In any case, the angel Raphael, who accompanies him on his journey, and he tells him that he instructs him what he should do, and that on the wedding night he should pray. And Raphael says something along the lines of that, don't worry, and it'll be all right. She's the one that was sort of destined for you, and you will be the one to save her.
Right.
In fact, well, that on the wedding night, and I use this very often at wedding homilies, there's this young man with his bride, and they begin their marriage praying together. He encourages her, for the two of them, to pray together, and they pray this prayer of thanksgiving for what the Lord has done, you know, bringing man and woman together, that is grand design, but also for themselves, you know, and that they should see their children's children and so forth. And in the end, they close the prayer, amen, amen, they say together.
Right.
And that's a unity in prayer, husband and wife. And I think that's such a fitting example of what the man is called to do. I would just maybe nuance a little bit, you know, that he was called to save her is what the angel told her. In fact, and I tell the grooms and brides that on their wedding day as well, that they each want what is the best for the other, and they want therefore the greatest good, and the greatest good that you could want for anybody is eternal salvation. So I tell the bride, you are supposed to be looking out for his eternal salvation, that he ends up in heaven, and the groom is supposed to be looking out for the same for his bride.
Right.
So, but both together, and the groom has a very important part to play, the husband and the father.
In terms of our culture, all right, it's very interesting that these gentlemen here are people of our culture. Do you think our culture lends itself to these carefully defined rules? Do you think our culture is working against, you know,
what is supposed to be,
what is supposed to be?
Father.
Because we love, I mean, our culture loves to talk about the Hona man.
Yes, and
loves
all
to
these
talk
different
about
things.
the-
Yes.
A lot of negative
Attributes,
images of men.
Yes.
So we have a serious hurt in our culture,
Yes.
which is not unique to us, although it seems to be pretty entrenched here.
It really does seem to be unique.
It's pretty it's entrenched, but I'll tell you a statistic. About a year ago, a little over a year, because I used it in Lent last year, and in the US, they determined early last year that the current figures, 41% of all births take place to single mothers, unwed mothers in the US, 41%. And I gave that statistic in a very remote rural community, very small community, in a Lenten retreat last year. And sitting in the congregation, and you know, was probably one of 2 or 3 males, most of them were females, and he was the elder of the community. And when I said 41% in the US, he called out from the back, it's worse here. And I take it he knows what he's talking about.
Yes.
And I think that it's a very real wound we suffer from.
Yes.
I think we're in denial about it. And when you're in denial of anything, you can't do anything to make it better. I think that sometimes our denial is reflective of, to say it and to identify it is also it is also a hurt.
Yeah,
you
so
know?
you need to be able to
but
identify
we need
that
to go
pain.
beyond that. The
Yeah.
whole analogy of the surgeon, and you have to go through the surgeon's knife in order to bring the healing.
You're right.
I think we need to admit that hurt,
Yes.
own up to it, that this is our reality, and then start to do something about
I
it so
believe
that we
so
can
too,
work towards
Father.
the ideal
Yeah.
of that we're not living.
Yeah, I believe when you identify your pain, when you identify that you are hurting, you know, that is the first step to any kind of progress that you can experience. Because if you're living, as you said, in denial, I mean, basically, as I say, you're living in a pity party because you're living in denial. You're basically feeling sorry for yourself. And you're living in that hurt and, you know, why is this happening to me? But, you know, I believe what you say, Father. You have to be able to identify that pain.
Yeah, well, and it's a great challenge for, I would say, many of these males to work against a culture. I mean, a culture is, you know, it's pervasive. It's, you know,
Yes.
It's almost trendy, you know.
yeah,
It's almost trendy.
You
the
don't. I
culture.
mean, for you to go against that, you know,
Yeah,
go
it
against
almost seems
you
like
made a fool of.
uncanny.
You made
Yeah.
a fool of. You. So, and especially with men, ego is a big thing for men. I would say, you know,
Trinidadian men.
how they go look, you know.
Yeah, how you look.
So, in the face of that, you know, what can men do?
I think we have to be, or what can men do? I thought you were going to ask me what can we do to get a message to men. But I think that it really comes down to if, you know, there is a selfishness in the world, you know, and there's a lot of self-love in the world, and not just here, you know, that's the culture of the world today, I think. And so that's reflected, I think, sometimes in that single parenthood, single motherhood.
Yeah.
I think we have to continue to preach the message and to be relentless, you know, because we preach it in season, out of season. What is the ideal that the Lord calls out to us, holds out to us? And yes, it is important that if we find that people are not living in the ideal, yes, we have to minister to them where they are. We have to be supportive. We have to have a supportive structure in the church. We have to be ministering to them pastorally, sensitive, and so forth. But I think we can't lose sight of what, if God has ordained that it should be different, and that man and woman should be together in the rearing of a child, that's how the family, that's how the child, that's how the new generation, the young generation is going to flourish. If we deny that, if God wants it that way, that's the way we find our greatest good. If we deny that, we will never get the greatest good.
Right.
So we have to work from where we are,
Right.
and we have to preach that message of what the ideal, where we find our true happiness, and it's doing it the way that God has asked us to do it. We have to continue to do that. I think we can only hope that over time we reach our men, and you know, I think it's two-pronged approach. We have to try to reach the men, but you also have to try to do it with the little ones coming up, so that we don't repeat the cycle.
Yeah, we
you
have
know?
to break the cycle
and
some way.
some people may not be hearing the message now anymore, but we have to reach the little ones, so that they hear the message, and they seek to turn things around
And make a difference.
But I think if a man really is interested, and I think it comes to that, you know, in the welfare of my children, even if it's not a marital situation, you know, but how can I do the best for my child? If it is a marital situation, then is the welfare of my child a sufficient goal, encouragement for me that I can deny my own preferences and desires, make a compromise, be reconciled in the family situation, and it's always going to take some compromise, because you know it's two different people, and bring the family back together for the well-being of my child, if for no other reason, for the good of the child. So many statistics, and I mean common sense, but have shown that divorce hurts children, children and women, but the children are the most vulnerable.
You're right.
So I think it's just coming to that acceptance and realization that, you know, my child is important, this new life.
Yeah, so should we get into the next clip?
Well,
All right, so let's get into the next clip, you know, where we will also see the fathers, and basically they will be discussing, you know, their challenges as a father, and, you know, them discussing what it was like growing up with their father. So let's get into the second clip.
Greatest challenges in being a father is when you see one of your children going wrong. I mean, it might be something in school, in their education, as an adult, it's something in their life. Once you see something going wrong, it do be painful, and that is the challenge, to ensure that you have done your best and that you have set the pace for the child to be on the correct path.
I think one of the greatest greatest challenge for me of being a father is actually being a father. Fatherhood is something that most of us as men, we are not taught about. You know, we just reach a certain age, we have a wife and we engage in activities that will bring about children. When children are on the scene now, we are thrown into that fatherhood role. And how do we function as fathers? Where do we get our manual from? Where do we get our model from? And you know, sometimes we go through trials and error. And depending on the error, sometimes it might be so grave that it's difficult to bounce back as a father. So I feel that's the greatest challenge for me as a father, really understanding my role and performing it to the best of my ability.
My greatest challenge to be a father is to be able to spend both quantity and quality time, both with my wife and with my children.
I grew up in a single parent home, but I think what I needed most was that guidance in the teenage years. As a teenager, you go out there, sometimes other boys will indulge you in things that you don't know right from wrong. I think that is what I needed. Leadership, the guidance, the examples to see where I'm going wrong, or to tell me, hey, if you do this, this is going to happen. That is most important, or to me.
As a little boy growing up for me, I didn't have much expectation of my father, because the society or the community in which I grew up, father was like just being around for the family, you know, being a provider. And I have grown over the years to understand and to expect as a father, the major role is to provide. But now with dedication and with enlightenment, you know, there are so much other avenues or so much other concepts that actually, or skills that actually makes a father a good father. But now in retrospect, I think that my father was, even though maybe I didn't have the expectation of him, I see that some of the qualities that exhibited in a good father, that he actually had those qualities.
My father died when my mother was pregnant with me. So my mother had to wear both hats, as a mother and a father. She did a pretty good job, I guess you can tell. And obviously, my greatest, perhaps, the absence of not having him in a physical sense to be that role model, because whenever my peers, especially at school age, talk in terms of the times that they had with their father, I missed having a father as such.
All right, and welcome back. So a lot of
some
things
shared moments
yes,
there, yes.
some very pertinent points, and I would say deep reflective contributions there by our interviewees. Among the things that came up in terms of challenges that fathers face, a lot of them spoke about the lack of discipline, this need of guiding children to, you know, the correct form of living and stuff like that. It seems as though we know this by instinct, but what is happening? I mean, knowing it and there seems to be a kind of
a disconnect. Yes,
all right,
between the two.
And and I don't know. In your case, have you experienced such a disconnect between lack of, you know, your father wanting something of you, and then you're not seeing that in him or something like that, or he has been more consistent in your case?
Well, my dad has always, you know, growing up with my dad, yes, they have had moments of disconnection, you know, and of course in any, you know, family relationship, there is, you know, mishaps and stuff like that. But my dad has always been a very specific person, you know, he would always tell me, you know, this is what I would like of you, and even if it is he didn't tell me, he would show by example, you know. And when it came to discipline, you know, my dad was he was stern, but he is the person in my family who is the affectionate one. So his discipline came with stern, but then after 2 minutes of him being stern and not hardly ever like raising his voice, he would come and give me a hug, or he would come and laugh, or he would come and make a joke with me. So with regard to discipline, it really didn't. It was more of a, I would say, still a mixture of being strict and affectionate. You know, it was never really anything to, you know, traumatized me, I should say. Yeah.
In case of, in terms of guidance from my father, all my father had to do was give me the look, you know.
Yeah. I used to get those signs sometimes.
I mean, I'm not saying anything to make my mother sound bad, but even though my mother would be the one to use corporal punishment on myself and my brothers most of the time, we still feared our father more than our mother.
Yeah,
there was something about, you know, his disposition that really required us to, you know, give him all the respect, you know. But anyway, coming back to that, yes, considering what our interviewee said, what do you think is this disconnect going on? That we say that, okay, this is what we expect of children, but yet, you know, fathers are not being what they want their children.
Yeah.
You know, want of their children.
I think, well, so many things come to mind, but I think, you know, when you talk about the discipline and how it is carried out and so forth, I think you talked about the look of the eye, which is something that today children don't know that.
Yeah,
and you know why that is? Because you have to be there to give the look of the eye.
Right. Yes.
And we have a lot of absent mothers and fathers, you know, but a lot of absent fathers who are not physically, they may be in the home, but they are emotionally distant, they are absent, they spend most of the time, you know, out in the workplace or outside of the home, not focusing on their responsibility there.
Right.
And I think it's important to be there. Availability is important.
Right.
One of the interviewees, as you call him, talked about not being taught when he was growing up of how to be a father and so forth.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, Family Life Commission, I guess we have to continue to do.
Yes.
We have the parenting courses, and I think we have to go back into even teenagers and have remote preparation for marriage, for being a parent. A lot of the teachings, theology, the body, human sexuality, and how you live that out, and fruitfulness, and so I think we have to do a lot of remote preparation that we didn't have in the past.
Yes.
But I'll say this too, that besides the formal teaching, if you approach your fatherly role, or indeed mother, but we're talking of fathers
here,
if you approach your fatherly role with heart, availability is important.
Right.
Because, you know, you may not feel you have all the skills, the formal skills in the world.
Right.
But if you were there and you're available, the interaction, just that you are there. There was one statistic I came across, I think it was done some years ago too, 1999, and there were 12 to 15-year-olds, so young teenagers. Their single greatest concern, 22% of them, that they wanted their parents to spend more time with them. The number of the percentage of parents who thought that was their single greatest concern was 8%. So you see, there's a disconnect there. The children want the parents to be there. I mean, it's the same thing I think as a priest. Sometimes in a pastoral situation, your availability, you may not know. You know, we all go through it to say in grief situations and so forth. You are never able to come up necessarily with the right word, and people don't want you to have the right word to say at that time. They want your presence, and your presence being there, that will be enough. And the Lord will give you the opportunity to you know, whatever words are necessary. I think it's the same thing as a father. That if you're there, you have the opportunity to interact. Just do simple things, everyday things with your child, and that says a lot. I think a lot of our children today are hurting because they know that you haven't spent enough time with me. It says that you don't love me, and even if you are wrong, you're not spending the time to tell me what is the right thing to do. And I think a child knows that you don't love me enough to tell me to do the right thing. I think we suffer from that as well.
All right. Just to bring up another point, one of the final interviews on the second part of the clip, when he was speaking about his mother, his single mother, who was able to do such good work in terms of forming him as an individual. I mean, so often we make the emphasis that yes, fathers are important and stuff like that, but here it is, there are women who are doing both the roles of mother and father and doing it successfully. Shouldn't we just ease up a little bit instead of coming down hard on people who think, you know, that
important question. I think, well, we have to make a distinction, two different situations. One, like in his case, where his father passed away, and didn't abandon the family, you know, voluntarily. Because because there you have, well, in his case, he didn't know his father at all. Sometimes the child is a very young child when the father passes away. And even in that few years, child is very impressionable. The father can have an example, a living, well, pass on an example to the child, and so that's their heritage, their inheritance from the father. But and certainly it can be remembered fondly, you know, when your father was there. It's a different thing, and you then have to make the best of that somewhat imperfect situation. Is different to a father voluntarily abandoning or distancing himself from his family, because that's a situation now where you're going to feel abandonment, you're going to feel hurt, you're going to feel being unloved, rejected, and I think that's a wound that many of our children feel today. So there are two different situations, but in the you know, whichever one, however it came about, that the mother has done a tremendous job. And sometimes you can't deny that. But there are still difficulties. One, I know of a particular mother, and she had 3 young children. Well, at the time I'm talking about, the eldest was probably 12. And she was on her own. She was covering 2 jobs, one of which involved some shift work time. So that limited her time being at home with these children. No father. This was not a situation of a deceased father, you know. And I say, look at the pain that family was in, that mother trying her best, and to make ends meet, to be there for the children, and you know, so we don't do that by design. In a sense, you know, God holds out for us the gold, you know, and yes, there are times when, through natural causes, both may not be around, but we certainly don't set out to try to get the bronze, or not to finish the race at all. You know,
for the gold.
We seek for the gold because and what God offers us is the best. That's what we should be seeking for. You know, and we try our best to achieve that.
Now, moving on to another issue. The role of, I mean, we are talking about fatherhood here, not just about the fact that they are masculine or male and stuff like that. They are.
But they are.
Yes.
And they are also a member of a family, all right? Much, I would say a topical issue right now in our society is that given the prevalence of separation in married life, the enmity between the wife and the husband could sometimes reach a level where the children suffer much. Let's say in the case of in a court situation, there will always be this fear that the law is going to come down hard on the father, and there's this perception that the law is often siding with the woman,
mother,
and stuff like that, right? In situations like this, we know of one group in the society, in Trinidad and Tobago, Single Fathers Association, who have taken the mantle to bring out this issue, this silent voice of men who suffer in such situations. Talking to women out there who are faced with this situation, how would you recommend, one, how they should treat this issue when it comes to their children, and secondly, what steps could the father take in order to mend such situations?
Well, again, that is brokenness in our society, brokenness in families. I suppose, you know, in terms of trying to make a bad situation, the best of a bad situation, that yes, women need to be accommodating of the father to have his time with the child and so forth. I mean, all those things that are worked out in, as you say, in court. I said earlier, on the father's part, you know, if on both the mother and the father, if they value, even if it's for the sake of the children, but in terms of the well-being of my child, who is not going to flourish. And there are many statistics that show what happens to children of divorce and of single parents, and so that they don't do as well in society. They don't do as well, you know, personally. In those situations, if the well-being of my child is there, if for no other reason, can I make the effort to be reconciled in this family situation. But again, that is attempting to deal with, in a sense, the result of the brokenness already taking place.
Right.
I think we have to do a lot more. The work of the Family Life Commission, the work of the church in general, to emphasize the importance of marriage, to prepare our couples, the men and women. You know, you mentioned Engage Encounter earlier. All these preparation courses and programs to prepare our couples for marriage so that it does become a lifelong commitment with all the values that, you know, we are saying that are important for the man and the husband and wife, for the children, the well-being of the whole family.
Right.
And so I guess I'm going back to the ideal, you know. In one sense, your question is trying to deal with, once it's broken, how do you deal with it?
Yeah.
And yes, we have to deal with it. And it's, again, can I overcome my own selfish desires on both the side of the mother and the father to make this thing work, that the child benefits as best that it can in this broken situation. But before we even get there, let's try to keep that situation from breaking. I think that's where we need to be. That's what we need to be holding out. Again, the ideal.
Right.
While life is not always ideal, that's what we should be shooting for. And that's what we should be trying to promote and inculcate. And I think that's the work of the church today in marriage preparation. Yeah.
All right, so thank you, Father, for sharing that. Let's get into the third clip, which is basically the fathers discussing, you know, the kind of pressures that they feel when they, you know, from society. So let's see the third clip.
As the breadwinner in a family, I feel that career-wise, fathers do feel pressure. There's always that push, that drive to reach to the top. And sometimes in reaching to the top, a man may have to ignore his family at times. A man may have to be out there 7 days a week at times. Sometimes 16 hours of the day he's not home. I feel these are the pressures that really affect family life.
In addition to fathers, I feel men as a whole face pressure from society. In that society looks at men as being the macho man, whether being this man who stands strong and this man who is fearless. As a result of that, the man needs to be so much more than he is. And sometimes as men, in the home of origin that we grew up in, we didn't see that those qualities being exhibited from our father, and we actually learned through modeling. So becoming a man, becoming a father now, we are thrust into a role that you know that we need to learn on our feet. And sometimes as men, pressure is on us because society is looking at us. Problems in society can be more attributed towards men, or men not being around, or the lack of men being men, or maybe men actually standing up and being strong. So I feel all those issues sort of pressure men, and some men respond admirable, and others just fall through the crack because of the pressures.
Most people think that fathers are always MIA, missing in action, and then they feel that fathers can always fix things, because that's what men do. They always fix things, and when we can't fix things, they look upon us as failures. Really and truly, so much is depending on the father. Really and truly, in a nuclear family, you have both mother and father, and the responsibilities are dual one. So yes, society puts that sort of strain, or you know what I mean, and in a negative way on the fathers as well.
And welcome back. So, Father, if you could just take on from what these interviews were saying.
And I think the last couple of clips there, you could hear a bit of pain in terms of the struggle of how hard it is. And it is.
It is hard.
It is. And I think one of the comments that was made, you know, I am sympathetic to that yes, it is not the father's role alone. He has an important role, but it's both. And I think we have to keep remembering that.
Yeah.
That's how the Lord set it up. Male and female, He created them, and you know, so there's a complementarity of the roles, you know, and yes, so that it's not all on His shoulder, but both of them working together. And I think we have to emphasize that the mother and the father together, and that's the best for the family. But just as, you know, I keep saying all the time, I've been kind of promoting, we have to look at the ideal.
Right.
We know what we have on the ground, and we know
Yes.
what we have to work with. I just thought it would be good for us, certainly we shouldn't end tonight without a few words. John Paul II, who himself was quoted as saying, if he was remembered, he would like to be remembered as the Pope of the family.
Right.
And he was very much that. This document he brought out, The Role of the Christian Family in the Modern World, Familiaris Consortio, 1981. When I looked at the date, he was only 2 or 3 years Pope, and he was many years Pope, in 26 or something like that. So this was very early on. It tells you a bit of his agenda or his priorities.
Where he was going
And I just want to
things,
share a little bit when he's talking about families.
Right.
There's a section here, section 25, for those who may have the document, men as husbands and fathers. And I will just kind of skip through because I don't know if we can read the whole thing. It's not that long. Authentic conjugal love presupposes and requires that a man have a profound respect for the equal dignity of his wife. So mothers and wives don't need to fear. You're not her master, right, St. Ambrose, but her husband. And he talks about St. Ambrose talks about reciprocate her attentiveness to you. So the wife must be attentive to the husband must be attentive to the wife, and be grateful to her for her love. It talks about a very special form of personal friendship. It talks about a new attitude of love and manifesting towards his wife a charity that is both gentle and strong.
Right.
And maybe men sometimes find, how do I mix those two things?
together, yeah.
And but that's something we have to grapple with.
Yes.
Love for his wife as mother of their children, and love for the children themselves are for the man the natural way of understanding and fulfilling his own fatherhood. Above all, where social and cultural conditions so easily encourage a father to be less concerned with his family, or at any rate, less involved in the work of education, efforts must be made to restore socially the conviction that the place and task of the father in and for the family is of unique and irreplaceable importance. I met this gentleman about a year and a half or less than that ago, and he had 2 teenage daughters. This man exuded happiness from his family. He couldn't understand men who would have to go and have a drink after work before going home, because as far as he was concerned, his wife and his daughters were his happiness.
Right.
And he was going where he was happy. And he would go home, he'd spend time with them, talk to his daughters about school. They would tell him about school. He would go to PTA meetings, and they would think, but you're a single father? And he said, no, I'm interested in my daughters. And his daughters were flourishing.
Yeah.
And when people told him, but your daughters are bright, he said, my daughters are not bright, they're just happy. And so he believed that he made his daughters happy, and they flourished.
Right.
So as experienced teachers, the absence, and we've been talking a lot about this tonight, of a father causes psychological and moral imbalance and notable difficulties in family relationships, as does, and he talks about the contrary circumstances where you have an oppressive presence of a father, especially where it still prevails that phenomenon of machismo. So we were talking about this earlier.
Yeah.
You might have an extreme, a distant or absent father, but then on the other extreme, a father who is sort of
Very,
oppressive.
right.
Both of them are not, neither of them is good for the family. In revealing and reliving on earth the very fatherhood of God, and the reference is there to Ephesians 3:15, a man is called upon to ensure the harmonious and united development of all the members of the family. He will perform this task by exercising generous responsibility for the life conceived under the heart of the mother, by a more solicitous commitment to education, a task he shares with his wife. So it's not the burden is not on him alone. He shares that with his wife. By work which is never a cause of division in the family, but promotes its unity and stability. Certainly his focus should not be there to the exclusion of the family. And by means of the witness he gives of an adult Christian life, which effectively introduces the children into the living experience of Christ and the church. That last point is a very important point, because when we talk about teaching, and yes, teachers of the faith, nurturers of the faith, both mother and father, but the example of a Christian life well lived. So again, we might not think we have all the skills or all the knowledge that we need, but if we live that Christian life, so the way we live our life morally and the attentiveness to the family, our children will learn from that. You learn from that, from your own father.
Yes.
And that is, so the availability, the attentiveness, and that witness, yes.
Well, you realize with that sharing that Father just gave us, it really did sum up you know, the role of the father.
I would say the vocation.
Yeah, the vocation of the father, and you know, that is what we wanted. That's the objective of the show tonight, to really highlight and to bring to view, you know, for our audience who are watching, you know, what really is who really is daddy, you know, who really is my dad. What is a dad supposed to do, you know?
But if I may ask, what would you say, in what special way can we at least lift up fathers in society today?
Yeah, how can
given
we
what
lift
we
them up?
given what we have explored and
Tonight.
retrieved in terms of these roles and stuff like that, how best can we really make this like a lamp for all to see?
Well, I certainly, as we said before, think that where there's damage and where people are hurting, and you're single fathers who are trying to have a share in their child's life, and so we need to try to support that as best we can. But yes, I think the light that has to be lifted up. Over the weekend, a couple celebrated their 65th wedding anniversary in the church, and so I highlighted it, you know, at the end of Mass, and everybody applauded them. So, but I told the congregation, I don't often do this, but I thought for such a milestone, and we're suffering with marriages breaking up, we need to show where marriage is working, and that this couple was been together for 65 years. Well, similarly, I think the fathers and you know, the couples in our society, we need to highlight, and I know I have some in the parish. There are some families, mother, father, children, regularly in church together. They do things, church activities together. I think we need to have that message, that good news. We need to bring that good news out.
We need to have a forum for that good news.
Yes, we need to let others know that what you have struggled with and what you think is impossible, look at people who are doing it.
Well,
these people are successful.
I mean, maybe we could find a good kaiso or soca tune to jump up
maybe
to.
maybe something that, you know, that culturally inclined.
Not my forte. But
No, but it will add to our
Yes.
culture. I mean, once the message is out there,
Yes.
you know, and once it engulfs everything we do, I think it will definitely transform the way how we approach father.
Right, so tonight we dealt with fatherhood and very, very healthy discussion. On behalf of the Family Life Commission, Nairon and myself, Father, we'd like to thank you for coming on the show tonight and sharing with us your views, you know, enlightening our audience. We're very thankful for everything you have to offer, and very thankful for what you continue to do for us, not only for us here on the set, but for your parish. So we're very grateful for all the work that you do and all the work that you will continue doing. For fathers out there, the Family Life Commission, we have, for those fathers who would like to gain the skills on improving their parenting skills, you know, really want to oomph it up a bit, we have Common Sense Parenting. That's a very skill-based, practical program that helps parents to really, you know, become closer to their children with regard to communication and, you know, learning how to discipline children effectively, you know, and the art of consequences and stuff like that. We also have Parenting and Family Life, which in that manual, it highlights fatherhood and it shows you the healthy lifestyles of fathers, you know, how to be a good father. So at the Family Life Commission, we offer those programs to you fathers that are, you know, watching us tonight. And for those fathers that are hurting, you know, you experience great pain, whether, you know, there's a loss of a family member, or there's a divorce, or there's something empty you're feeling inside. We also offer counseling services. You know, give us a call at the Commission, 672-4280 or 299-1047. And we are here to help you fathers. You know, this month is for you, and we wish you a very happy Father's Day. We will proclaim your glory, fathers, you know, and to our priests as well, you know. Of course. So yes.
Playing a very important role in bringing up the children of God.
Yeah. So
well, I want to thank both of you for, and the Family Life Commission, for giving me the opportunity tonight to come and share, because it was a privilege for me, because as you know, as you realize, it's something very close to my heart. Family in general, and this particular aspect that I think we need to look at to get more right than we have been living it. So I was very happy to be here, and I thank you for that opportunity.
Yes, Father. And you know, we will of course invite you. We never know, we might have a part 2, right, Nairon, to discuss, you know,
there's so much richness we could learn.
About, you know, about different things, and of course your forte being family life, you know. So I'm really looking forward to, you know, having you again on the show, Father. And you know, with your parish and stuff like that, you know, you can always call the Family Life Commission and, you know, to host programs by you.
And we do.
Yes. Yes, you do. So thank you once again for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Good night, viewers.
Good evening.